realizing that no matter what else you've accomplished in the course of this day, this is not what success is supposed to feel like. Like walking into that room and feeling like you barely know your wife, you're on the brink of divorce. You barely know your kids. Like I was in the worst physical shape of my life. And standing there in that moment, for whatever reason, hit me like a Mack truck. And yes, I pulled up in a nice car. Yes, I parked in a nice driveway of a nice house, and I walked in and had all of the traditional trappings of what most people deem success. But by every other metric, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, like absolute gutter. So I decided in that moment that this is not what success is going to be defined as in my life. I'm going all in on being successful in every area. And that's kind of where my personal motto of no half cakes came from.
Welcome to the Richer Soul podcast, where we share how to live in harmony across health, wealth, time, relationships, and spirituality. How do you bring them all together to live your ultimate life? The best thing is we've got nothing to sell, just great advice from people who've succeeded and lived that dream. Welcome to Richer Soul, Jim Sabellico. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
That's a great question. I would say my family and school taught me not much about money. Money wasn't a topic that we ever really discussed. Didn't learn anything about it in school. I learned about it, trial and error, I would say. Starting to make money at a young age and enjoying the freedom that I could feel as a young kid, having some money to earn, money to burn with no real expenses at that point.
Beyond that, just normal middle class, was there a certain type of like upbringing that you had, or?
I would, if I had to put a term to it, I'd say probably upper middle class. We had whatever we needed and then some. We could enjoy the nicer things, the nicer cars, the vacations. There was always a sense of kind of that freedom aspect to it.
And even though your parents did well, they didn't teach you how to do well, or they did teach you how to do well, they just didn't teach you about the dollars and cents behind it?
Yeah, I would say it was more of a standard as far as working hard, saving your money, paying yourself first. That was, the kind of principle of it. I don't think we've ever had any explicit conversations about like, hey, here's exactly what you need to do. Here's how stocks and bonds work, that sort of thing. It was more modeled than taught.
Okay. But it sounds like they gave you good money behaviors in the sense of there weren't any negative types of money behaviors that you experienced really as a child. You had the opportunities to do things.
Yes, definitely.
So this is interesting because you had all this stuff handed to you, and yet you wanted to make your own money.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't know if money was the initial driver for why I wanted to do that. It was more that I saw my parents as hard workers going out and being fruitful. And for me, it was summertime as a kid when I didn't have much else going on, that I didn't feel like I should sit home and play video games. I wanted to also be productive because that's what I saw. So I then decided to grab the family lawnmower, walk around the neighborhood and knock on doors and cut people's grass for money. And I think the initial push there was the productivity part rather than the let's go make money. I did earn a bunch of money, and I was an 8-year-old kid, right? So I had no expenses at the time. So I enjoyed the freedom feeling, and that started tainting my relationship with money at that age.
Do you know where that because that's not normal to have that productivity driver. Even though you see your parents working hard, usually when kids are given stuff, they don't work for more. And yet you did.
Yeah. To me, I know not everyone probably shares the same belief, but I think a certain group of people are born with the entrepreneurial spirit, and just, not everyone is cut for it. But to me, I believe, within my gifting was that entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay. So it was just innate talent. And you said, this is what I want to do. Because if you're mowing lawns at 8 years old, it's got to be something of that nature.
Yeah. I don't know if I would put the word talent to it. I would just say, this desire to produce rather than a talent. I don't know if I was talented at it.
Okay. So you made money, and then you said, yet it caused a belief system that maybe didn't serve you well.
Yeah. So for me, like I said, I got that early taste of freedom, feeling like, hey, you've got a bunch of money with no real expenses. And as an 8-year-old kid, what am I going to do with it? I saved a bunch, but I also had the ability to go to the toy store and just buy a toy, and you could really do whatever the heck you wanted. That money went a long way when I was a kid. So I got really addicted to this feeling of being able to have whatever I wanted, whether it was a car or a TV or a laptop or whatever it was, feeling like I could just go buy it. And if I needed more money, I could just go make it. So it was kind of this Midas touch feeling, if you will, that I had, where I would jump into a business, be able to sell whatever I wanted to and produce more money. So I didn't necessarily appreciate the saving side of it at that age.
You must have been good if you're making that much money to buy all those things.
Yeah, I sold a whole lot of things. I think part of it was just the timing was right and kind of seeing how to capitalize on an opportunity. Some examples I could think of were back when like Nextel phones first came out. I used to walk people back to my house on lunch break from school and install wallpapers and ringtones on their phone for $20 a piece because no one else was doing it. So it was kind of this, I went on eBay and bought this $45 cable from China and was able to figure out how to make it work. And, it was just kind of first to market with a lot of things locally.
Interesting. So what happened from there? You go through high school, you're making money, still went to college, or decided you were just going to go make money?
So I still went to college, and it's a fact that we laugh about because I, at the time, owned a car stereo business and was working 60 plus hours a week there. I commuted to college. I probably went to one more class than I needed to just to get by. If they said, hey, you've got to show up at least 60% of the time, I probably went 61% of the time just to make sure that I went and got my degree, which I did get. I have it framed. There's proof that I actually went there. No one really believes in my family that I actually went to school because I never made a single friend, couldn't tell you a single thing about it, but I went to say that I went. Again, at the time, I owned another business. I was doing crazy hours there. I didn't necessarily go because I valued the education that I got from it. I went because it was expected to go. I wound up getting a really hefty scholarship for it to go to the honors college. So I went, got good grades. Just turned out I didn't necessarily spend a lot of time there.
What was your degree in?
Business marketing and management.
Okay. So it was in line with your talents, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason I didn't necessarily give it a lot of validity was spending time in these classes where you're being taught by a professor who's got less experience than you and who's teaching you from a textbook where they don't necessarily understand the principles behind actually generating revenue, running a profitable business, where I had years at this point, 15 years of experience in doing that before setting foot in that class.
Interesting. So you graduate college, you've got a successful business that's taking up all your time. And then what?
So I would maybe fast forward a little bit right after that because it was an accumulation game for me. I wound up starting a second business after that. And I was on this roll of how much far can I run up the scoreboard? It was car, house, toys, whatever else you could want. I was still being diligent about setting aside money and trying to be financially smart. I just wanted to see how far I could push it as far as the probably now social media definition of success, where it's like, hey, you've got the fancy car, you've got the nice house, you go on the nice vacations. And we got married. I got married to my wife. We had our first kid. And when we found out that we were having our son, I defaulted into provider mode. That was the example that I had when I was a kid. It was, hey, you're going to make sure that your family has whatever you need. I didn't have the first clue how to change a diaper, how to take care of a kid when it cries. What do you do? No idea. I knew how to make money. So I said, my wife is incredibly gifted at parenting, being a mother. You could give her any child or pet in the world, and she will make that thing happy in a heartbeat. That wasn't my skill set. So from the business management side, I let this part run my life at that point. I said, hey, your wife is really good at, handling the child side. Why don't you provide for your wife so she can stay home, right? She can have as much time as she wants to spend with the family. You can go be a provider and make sure that there's money and whatever else. And that's basically what I did for the first 6 years of my son's life until everything kind of fell apart.
So what happened? How did it fall apart? I mean, you got everything relatively well under control, I would assume.
Yeah. So what had happened was October 29th, 2019, 8:45 at night, I wind up coming home from work. And it's my son's 6th birthday. And if you ask me what I was doing that was so important up until 8:45 at night, I honestly couldn't even guess at this point. But whatever it was, in the moment, I must have thought it was important. because I get home 8:45 at night and I'm like, all right, well, let's sing happy birthday before the kids go to bed. And mind you, at the time, I was very used to leave the house at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd come home at 9 o'clock at night. It was first in, last out mentality. So I get home 8:45 at night and I could kind of just feel this feeling in the house where everyone's just frustrated and exhausted. My son had some friends over earlier in the day. My wife is exhausted from entertaining the kids. And in comes dad looking to be the hero. And she plops down this half-eaten birthday cake on the counter. And I could just like feel my heart sink in that moment, realizing that like, no matter what else you've accomplished in the course of this day, this is not what success is supposed to feel like. Like walking into that room and feeling like you barely know your wife, you're on the brink of divorce. You barely know your kids. Like I was in the worst physical shape of my life. And standing there in that moment, for whatever reason, hit me like a Mack truck. And yes, I pulled up in a nice car. Yes, I parked in a nice driveway of a nice house and I walked in and had all of the traditional trappings of what most people deem success. But by every other metric, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, like absolute gutter. So I decided in that moment that this is not what success is going to be defined as in my life. I'm going all in on being successful in every area. And that's kind of where my personal motto of no half cakes came from.
Was it that quick? And what I mean by that is you made this decision. Did the next day change? Or was there a process to kind of go through?
Very much a process, still a process. And I'll tell you, in the course of the next probably 2 to 3 weeks after that day, things got worse before they got better. So I was initially angry at the world. Angry that I believe this definition of success, angry that my wife didn't wait for me, angry at my clients for giving me money, like you name it, I was pissed and angry at everybody but myself, right? I wasn't taking accountability for the fact that, hey, you made these decisions, you put the priorities in that order and things got to change. So definitely took a while. It took some time after that, wound up getting in touch with a mentor who we sat down and had some difficult conversations and realized like, some things got to change and went on a journey. Things at this point, now 6+ years later, are miles different than they were. But I would say it's still a journey I'm on.
It takes time to rewrite the beliefs and the patterns in the way we show up in the world.
Yeah, 100%.
Why do you think it was so impactful for you? Because a lot of people miss those signals. They don't even register.
I couldn't tell you. I don't know if there was a specific reason why that moment hit me harder than any others, but it did. It gave me this feeling of, hey, this version of yourself that you think you are, this super successful person, maybe not successful in the areas that it should be. So to be honest with you, I don't remember if there were other signs and signals, in the weeks or months prior to that kind of culminated into that experience. I don't remember that, to be honest. But for whatever reason, that was the moment that I decided, hey, something's got to give.
So how do you define success today?
I define success as the ability to bring joy into a difficult situation. And to expand on that, the way that I see it, there's a couple reasons I define it that way. Number one is it's internal. Okay, only I can decide if I am successful, right? I'm not putting that control in someone else's hands. Historically, success was defined as the stuff, right? That's up to someone else to decide if I am successful, if it meets their standard. So now I define it internally. Hey, do I feel successful? Am I able to bring joy into a difficult situation? Because life is full of them, right? Every day, no matter what, you're always going to run into some level of stressor. And I feel like, again, personally for me, am I able to meet that situation with a feeling of joy? Am I able to be happy, full of gratitude in these moments? And the ability to do that, to me, hey, if you are able to run up to a situation that by all means sucks, but you can do it and say, hey, I understand this thing sucks. We're going to feel it. We're going to accept it. I'm not going to lie to myself and pretend it's magically fine, but you're able to bring joy to it anyway. To me, that's where success is. It's being present. It's being appreciative of the opportunity to be in this situation right now, no matter how frustrating it might be.
How did you change your business life? I'm assuming you got home earlier at night. Was that a relatively quick process, a long process? Like, how did you pull yourself out of the business and to what extent?
So yeah, it was a longer process. I would say over the course of the next 6 months, things changed dramatically and time was on my side in that one, because if you remember where we're at in the world, That's right when we had our lockdown situation where everyone had to be home, right? So that was a forced shift into, hey, guess what? You're not going to be out of the house anymore. You're going to be home. So whether I liked it or not, I was home way more, and I sort of just never went back.
How close was the birthday to the COVID shutdown?
So October 29th was his birthday.
All right, so we were months.
Yeah, months.
We were
Right, there was
quite
the
a
first
few
month
months.
I would say, again,
4
roughly
months, 5
6 months ish.
Yeah.
But timing kind of worked out there.
Were you already shifting going into COVID, or was COVID kind of the push you over the cliff moment?
It was definitely over a cliff. There was already this eye-opening situation where I realized, like, hey, something's got to give. And I started working less and being around more. But it was not as cold turkey as that. So I definitely started making some changes in, we'll say, month 2 from that, where I realized, like, all right, you got to stop being angry and start taking some accountability. So I started slowly making shifts and kind of unwinding myself. But that definitely threw me into a cold turkey, hey, let's do it right now situation.
How'd your wife react?
It took a long time, years. I would say we're probably still unwinding it, to be entirely honest. But the first, we'll call it, year was maybe this disbelief in understanding, are you really the person you say you are? You've spent all of this time making that a priority and leaving me to deal with this. You got to kind of prove yourself at a certain point. And it's not that she was a doubter by any means. She's one of my biggest supporters and still is. But you got to look at the reality of it. I spent so much time saying this is who I am. And now you're living a different version of yourself. You have to really walk that out and prove that it's real.
And that makes sense. People don't always jump just because you change. They don't always. It takes a very long time to get everyone else to buy in. How did it go on the work side? I guess COVID kind of helped you on the work side of dealing with the shift with the people that worked with you.
Yeah, things have changed rather dramatically. I have a very different culture in my companies now than we did 6 years ago. It was originally very profit focused, and not that profit is a bad thing, right? But now it's more, hey, what are we doing? Who are we serving? And that has become the ultimate focus rather than, hey, how much money can we make and can we make more of it? It became, hey, how do we show up as the best version of ourselves and support people so everyone our business touches leaves them better than we found them. And ultimately, which is my favorite part of this, is all of the businesses that I had are now doing better than they were, and I'm working way less at them. So we lost some people, we lost some clients, there was a transition period, obviously, but the end result is way better than when I was trying to kind of force everything at my will.
Do you know where that anger came from? Was it always there, or did it get worse or grow? Or
I would say it was probably a disconnect with who I was, realizing that, like, hey, you spent however many years of your life believing that you are this person and walking that out every day. Realizing that, like, hey, maybe that wasn't true is really frustrating because it kind of shakes everything else about you, right? If you've believed this entire time that you were this person and all of a sudden now you're not, it causes you to feel a little bit lost. And the ego and pride just leaves you a mess. So I don't know if I would say it was anger more than just frustration and confusion, doubt, probably.
And all of that programming actually started when you were about 8 years old.
Yeah. I mean, I think as all of us get older, right? So I had a bit that was self-imposed from this, like, hey, you can go and make money doing whatever you want thing. And that became my identity as, like, the money guy. Everyone knew me in school as the guy who always had toys, who had money, who had whatever else. But then I think there's always this certain part of it that even today to any kid, when you ask a kid what they want to be, and they want to be veterinarian, they want to be an astronaut, they want to be whatever, as that kid gets older, you kind of knock them down a peg and say, oh, well, here's the realistic things you can do. I think that's kind of just where we're at culturally.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that does make sense from that. I've noticed lately, and partially because it seems like a lot of young men are angry. Maybe a lot of young women are angry too. I don't know. But it seems to be something that at some point people have to either grow out of or let go of
Yeah, I would say, looking around, I think a lot of it comes from this disconnect with trying to operate as someone you're not. And I think it's a lot of misplaced anger where they don't necessarily walk out their authentic self day to day. They don't show up in their own lives as them, right? They're putting on this facade of, hey, this is who I'm supposed to be. This is what the world tells me I need to be, or I need to go be a provider. I need to go do X, Y, and Z. And kind of because it's not aligned with who they actually are, it doesn't sit well, right? And there's this constant inner fight between who they were actually gifted to be and how they're showing up in the world. So it doesn't let them be at ease, really. They're in this constant state of putting on a mask or being a character all the time.
How did you figure out what your true self was meant to be?
Through a lot of freaking time and a lot of mistakes. And it's not something that I truly know at this point. I will say that because I think there's a lot of people who are looking to figure out, hey, what is my purpose? So I want to be super clear with that. I would say over the course of the past 6 years, I've gotten it 95% of the way nailed down. I think the rest of my life will be the rest, the next 5% will take me the rest of my, God-given life to figure that part out.
Were there certain things you found helpful to get you to the 95%?
Yeah. Gratitude is a huge one. Looking back and realizing that things worked out in a way that you couldn't have anticipated at the time. I think for a lot of high achievers, you want to kind of will your way through things and feel like you can control the outcome, and giving that up a little bit, having a little bit of faith, understanding that, things are going to work out in your favor, regardless of how much you try and control them to. And sometimes it feels super scary because it's not your plan. Looking back at things that shook out and saying, hey, in the moment, I thought this was the biggest catastrophe. A couple of years later, I look back and realize that set me up for this opportunity, which set me up for that, right? So kind of connecting the dots in reverse builds a little bit of a muscle where you start to then see that happening in real time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a perfect way for everyone to figure it out, but you've got to find your own path and go through the experiences and kind of do the work and take the time for that inner reflection to see what that's all about.
100%. I would say, if anything, I don't have the answer, right? I have the answer for me.
Right.
But I think that's the important part, like you said, is that I don't think anyone can sit in this chair and say, hey, the answer for you is X, Y, and Z. It's a uniquely like a one-of-one solution for you and you alone. So you got to try and figure out what that is. Anyone who tells you the opposite is just selling you something.
Do you find that most people want an answer delivered to them and not try to figure it out on their own?
Initially, yeah. I think we're kind of, accustomed to that Amazon Prime mentality where we want results and we want that feeling of comfort to just know, hey, this is what has to be.
When you say initially, does something change?
Yeah, I think you get really comfortable being uncomfortable. I would say personally, and a lot of the people that I work with, once you spend enough time on this journey of feeling like you're working to figure out who your best self is, you start to appreciate these difficulties more, which I know sounds weird, but when you run up against a situation which maybe lets you question, hey, am I wrong or right about this core value? You start to appreciate it more than, in a version of Jim 6 years ago might have been frustrated or let down. Now you start to look forward to those as a way to continue to test yourself and refine and figure out who the heck you are.
Now, since then, you've actually written a few books.
I have.
I'd love to go through a couple of them. Of course, my favorite one might be the money book. So what are the principles from that book?
So I'm going to start with the main book, which is called Show Up More. And it's kind of a double entendre to show up more in your life and show up more as more of yourself. So what that book is it's a 28-day guide, if you will, to go day by day to figure out who the heck you are and be that best version of yourself. So it's meant to kind of give you a little bit of very simple, followable steps to figure out who the heck you are and step into your authenticity and just start showing up in your own life. From there, I wrote additional books for show up more relationally, show up more financially, show up more spiritually, to kind of help people walk through the 6 slices of cake, if you will, to go on my little thing. But to me, I believe, if you're going to be successful, you got to be successful in all of the areas. It can't just be one, right? So you have to show up and have some level of spiritual health. You have to have financial health. You have to have emotional health, relational health, professional health, right? You have to be at your best, or at least pursuing your best in all of these areas to really maximize your success in life overall. Again, that's my personal belief. So I wrote these individual books to kind of look at, hey, if you are new in this journey, what I recommend is you start with the first book. Start with Show Up More. It's going to help you to kind of break out of that other people's expectations and start showing up for yourself. And then you do an honest assessment. You start to look at, hey, where am I weakest? What do I want to grow in first? Right? Maybe you're good spiritually. Maybe you're good physically, but your money skills are soft. That's when I say, hey, start with this book, right? Kind of choose your own adventure at that point. And let's talk about, hey, what are some of the principles, things that you may have learned that might be myths, things that you just were never explained in a simple and consumable way, and try and help people walk through that in a very step-by-step way.
What have you found most surprising after people have read the book? I'm sure you've gotten feedback from them.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's the most surprising, but it's definitely my favorite feedback is for people to say, I felt like you were talking to me. And kind of that moment where you realize like that person now, for the first time in a long time, finally feels seen and heard. They finally feel like they're not alone in this. And I think, it's a core belief of mine that everyone has 4 very basic needs to feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard. And I think once you accomplish those 4 things, you're able to be in a better position to start showing up for yourself and not seeking validation from other people, not necessarily believing in the judgment and criticism from other people because you feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard already. You're not seeking that from the outside. So for me, to be able to allow people to feel that initially kind of gives them just enough confidence to step out of their comfort zone and start taking a look at, hey, can I take the mask off? Am I comfortable to take a step forward and not worry about that criticism and judgment? And then it's just a matter of taking those steps one by one until you get the reps in and build that muscle up enough that you start enjoying the process.
Are there particular books that are more in demand? What I'm trying to gather is there a certain part of, you mentioned all those books, that people struggle more with, and so they're more apt to get that particular book? Or have you not noticed that?
I would say probably the main one is the bigger seller of all of them. And I don't know if that's because it's the main one, the first one, or it's
that
whatever.
makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say, if anything, there's probably a pretty even spread among all the individual topics.
Okay. When they get to these individual topics, is it just, and I haven't read those books, so I don't know, are they relatively basic? Are they mid-level? Are they advanced? Like when you go into a topic like that?
I would say they're probably on the more basic side.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily elementary school advice.
Right.
But it's meant to be the most consumable version of confidence building information that you may have been taught wrong. You may have never been taught. It's really meant to give you a solid understanding. And then, hey, if you want to be a master in this, then go seek individual wisdom from someone else. Right. But if you have no confidence yet at all, it's, hey, let me walk alongside you. Let me at least get you up to speed. Then you can kind of go pursue from the masters, right? I'm not trying to be a master in all these things and say, hey, I'm the best person in the world to teach you everything you need to know about money. No, I want to get you at least with enough confidence under you that you can start to approach some of these topics, with some level of confidence.
And that's kind of the same theme of this show. We talk about a lot of different parts of life. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to give you the basic framework, and then we'll find the masters in each to bring them in. Do you find as people look at the books that they are surprised at maybe parts they were missing, thinking they had it all down, and then they're like, oh, I didn't realize I was missing quite a few pieces of this puzzle?
Yes, definitely. And I think there's a part of that too where people have this desire, again, to want to be right. Right. They want to feel validated in their opinions. And I think a lot of that comes from feeling like if they are wrong, they suddenly lose their identity. For a lot of people, I believe, and this is, again, my personal opinion on how this shakes out, we wind up forming these echo chambers and we spend a lot of time in them because it validates our existence as, hey, who we are. And we are accepted. We are not criticized. We are right in that. And for a lot of people, if you're not necessarily comfortable with who the heck you are, your authenticity, your identity, it's uncomfortable to look at something and have a different point of view. So you don't necessarily feel comfortable expanding or questioning your beliefs, because if you do, you suddenly cease to exist as you. right? So you want to spend more time around people who make you feel validated, totally normal. So yeah, to me, I enjoyed that part of it where you can kind of help someone break out of that mold.
Interesting. So, one of the themes that I've always said is balance is impossible. And so, when you look at all these different areas, you're not going to balance across them. You've got to figure out harmony that works for you at different parts of life and at different seasons of life and bringing them all together. Have you found that most people are able to do that, or do you really have to help them to find that? And how do they bring it all together?
I would say everyone is able to. Most people are just not familiar with the process. I think a lot of people carry a lot of weight from childhood, from expectations, from their parents, from what society tells them that they're supposed to do. To me, I think the thing that I've found most common is the majority of the work is helping them to kind of unlearn the things that they believe about themselves for so many years and kind of get back to that childlike state where they are just pure and themselves.
So I was going to ask you, how do they put down those things, but is it more just a matter of unlearning them versus putting something down or letting go of something?
Yeah, I don't know that the right word for it, I think maybe not prioritizing, right? Because I don't know that you can ever truly unlearn something, right? You're always going to have that part with you, but it's understanding, hey, who are you? And believing that more than you believe what everyone else tells you you are. So I think it's really helping them kind of recenter with accepting who they are and understanding that, like, hey, even though you may not be super proud of whatever story you came from, right? No matter what happened in your past, whether you grew up upper middle class, whether you grew up poor, whether you had whatever situation came up in your life. I think a lot of people tend to hide that stuff because we're afraid we're going to be judged and criticized. And I think the greatest thing that I've found is giving people kind of that initial push, that courage to really step into that, because that's who they are, right? That they're one of one. And for us to hide that part of ourselves is really just a shame. So it's, I think giving people the initial push of courage to believe, hey, it's possible for you. You can kind of step into that and own that story is, I think, really what it takes.
Where do you see people struggle with the shift? Is there a particular area or does it just depend?
I mean, I would say it depends on the person. If I had to peg it to one area, it would be the acceptance factor of feeling like, hey, if I truly do this, no one's going to accept me for who I am. You're going to lose everything, right? Your life is going to turn into this upside down world where now all of a sudden you don't have any more friends. Your family hates you, right? Everything is different. I think people are comfortable in their discomfort, right? They know that there's a better way, but it feels scary because, hey, you're used to this, right? It's kind of like that feeling of, I know it's better on the other side, but it's still super scary to rip the Band-Aid off because that part's going to hurt too. So I think it's really kind of getting over that initial hump to realize, like, yeah, it's scary. I get it. I understand. I went through the process myself and still do. But for me, kind of having someone by my side to accept me for who I was, but still hold me up to a better standard was a game changer for me. So what I look to do now is be that picture of possibility for someone else, right? To be someone who can stand by them, whether it's, hey, you're in a season of doubt and you need someone to talk to and you shoot me a DM, you pick up the book, whatever the scenario is, being able to kind of be by someone's side and help them initially feel seen and heard, where they can kind of get their legs under them to start to do that for themselves. To me, I think that's the biggest initial change.
And sometimes it's just seeing the possibility that's out there and being able to do that and how that all comes together. As we're having this conversation, have I left out something that we should really be talking about and how that transformation comes to be?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered most of the entry level areas of it. And I say that because, again, like we talked about before, for every single person listening, your journey is going to be completely unique. And I'd be a fool to sit here and say, hey, this is the exact answer for you. But I think, covering the basics of feeling loved, appreciated, seen, and heard, of having a picture of possibility, like these are the kind of the core things that I think most people are really looking for. But again, it's just kind of going through that process and taking the next step in that direction and then just deciding to do it again. I really think, if anything, it would be the encouragement to just take one step in the right direction and then just keep focusing on the next decision, right? Just keep it one decision at a time. If you could move that foot in the right direction where you want to go, take the next step, right? One step at a time, and you're going to start to build up a little bit of momentum and then just keep going. But it's still always going to be that one step at a time.
Do you notice that people sometimes might struggle with having an uncertain path?
Yeah, it's super scary.
Why is it scary?
No, I think it goes back to that identity part, right? Because if you don't know who you are, I kind of think about it like, let's say you are a sailboat in the ocean with no sail. You're getting bounced around left and right, whichever way the wind's moving, whichever way the water's moving, rather. Right? But once you can kind of hoist your own sail and start to take control over where your boat goes and kind of know who you are, you now have a little bit of input and you understand, right? You've got an identity. You've raised your flag. You know who you are, and you can kind of weather that storm a little bit because you know who the heck you are in it. You're not necessarily worried about which way the wind blows. You're going to understand, hey, whatever is going to happen, I know who I am at the center of this. I'm going to be able to kind of control my own destiny and really be me inside of it. So I think that's the kind of scary part is if you don't know who you are initially as you go through that journey, it's super scary to have to wonder, right? To have to feel like you're lost. You don't have an identity, right? Because, like we talked about before, that initial feeling of you want to be right, right? So you stay in your comfort zone, in your echo chamber, because if you're wrong, now you don't know who you are. So I think that's kind of the biggest part of it.
And that would make a lot of sense, that people kind of struggle with that when they don't know. It does. It's for me, because I'm in a different place, it's not easy for me to see another place. And so that's why I always wonder where those things are and how people kind of make it through that and so forth. Interesting. And you still run your business and you use profit first in your business.
I do. Yes.
So how has that been helpful for you?
Yeah, it has been very helpful as far as just kind of the mentality of allocating funds in places and making sure that, hey, things are operational and smoother, right, than trying to figure that part out later. For me, initially, like we go back a bunch of years, it was always this feeling of fly by the seat of your pants because I always had the easy ability to just generate revenue, right? Generating revenue was never a concern. So it wasn't a worry about, hey, where's the profit? Because you could just crank the revenue lever way up anytime you needed money. But getting to a point where I wasn't trading my time for profit, right, and being able to show up in my own life meant getting kind of the ducks in a row. So kind of putting that into place where it was like, all right, cool. Now we've got a real system to say, all right, cool. We're going to take care of profitability as an A number one and understand, hey, above all else, things are going to be profitable. Right? We're not just going to be a hangout crew where we spend time and hope at the end of the month everything pans out. That's been kind of the shift in mentality.
It's interesting. You said for you, it was a shift of just not generating more revenue because that was very easy for you. And I think for entrepreneurs, that's a big belief. Oh, I'll just generate more revenue. I'm like, yeah, but then you're going to have to work harder.
Yeah.
It's a major shift that people don't realize that what you really should focus on is the end result, not that midpoint, which is what revenue kind of shows. Interesting. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
You can define it yourself and you shouldn't accept other people's definitions.
And that is very true. I think too often we're chasing somebody else's definition, which is why we're not happy with life.
Yes.
What's a lesson that cost you a lot but was worth every penny?
The value of today.
We forget that, right? As humans, we tend to live in the future and the past, not in the moment. It's a hard thing to do.
I mean, historically, and I know these are meant to be short, but briefly, like you have 100% success rate at waking up tomorrow. So it's super easy to kind of take it for granted, the fact that you're going to have tomorrow. But we're not promised the rest of this podcast episode. So like understanding that there is a lot of value in the fact that you're here right now and what you're going to do with it. To me, that's a lesson I can't put enough value on.
No, makes a lot of sense. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Do more things that make you happy.
What if they're chasing money and the wrong kind of happy?
You know what? Ultimately, if your heart is in the right place, I believe it'll work itself out, right? If you're chasing money for the sake of providing for your family, of providing for your community, it'll shake itself out, right? If you're pursuing it for selfish reasons, and ultimately, it's hard for me not to say it'll work out because that's what I did. And here I am now with an ability to sit and have conversations with other people. So I would continue to encourage people to do more things that make them happy.
And sometimes you need to learn a lesson.
Always.
If people would like to learn more about you and all the books, how do they do that?
.com would be the easiest place. I like to say the only Jim Sabellico on earth. So if you can look me up somewhere, you will 100% find me.
Awesome. We will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for checking out the full unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can get the full audio podcast with intro, outro, and a ton more details here on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Don't forget, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to go back through, and you can also get episode information on the Richer Soul website as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you're automatically updated as to what's going on and every time we release a new episode. The first few episodes of the Richer Soul podcast actually lay out the entire framework that everything is built on over all of these years. So check them out as well. Thanks for listening.